Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Schneiderman with the Software and Information Industry Association. Welcome to today's webinar, Common Core for Publishers. This is part 1 of 4 of a series, and we'll be focusing today on grades K through 2. We're very pleased to be joining on this webinar series with the APAS Educational Group. The series is intended to help content publishers and providers of other educational services, including especially digital products and services, to help understand what are the needs and requirements and goals around Common Core state standards, resources, and implementation of those. Just a brief word about SIIA for those not familiar. The Software and Information Industry Association is the principal trade group for the digital code and content industry. Among our 800 member companies are approximately 200 that are active in our education division, providing software applications, digital content, and web services to K-12 and higher education. Some of our key initiatives include our CODI Awards, our Innovation Incubator Program, our market surveys, and our conferences. Coming up, we have our Education Business Forum in New York City, December 10th through 11th. This annual forum brings together analysts, investors, company executives, and others to look at the key financial issues in the sector. You see on the event slide the rest of the upcoming webinars on the Common Core for Publishers series. November 20th, we'll be looking at grades 3 through 5, January 14th, grades 6 through 8, February 27th, grades 9 through 12. So encourage all of you to register for those others as well, and there may be some other events, especially for SI members, other events there that you'll be interested in. So with that, let me turn things over to Andy Pass, who generously agreed to involve and include SI in helping co-host this series. So Andy, thanks.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to join everybody. I am the Chief Executive Officer of APAS Educational Group. And basically the reason that APAS exists and what we do is develop customized work-for-hire content is because we know that education really has the potential to change the world. I was actually at Ed.S. I'm just flying home from Ed.S. now. Or excuse me, not Ed.S. I'm at Cole's Virtual School Symposium. And there was an awful lot of technology there. And I'm thinking about something that Tom Friedman wrote. Tom Friedman once wrote that technology is here. It's either going to do good or it's going to do bad. 9/11 could not have happened without technology. And at the same time, what happens in delivery rooms every day could not happen as effectively as it does without technology. Technology is here to stay, and it's incredibly powerful. It's our students, it's young people today who are going to decide for the future generation how technology is used. Is it used for good, or is it used for bad? APAS knows that, and we know that you know that, and we want to help develop content that challenges students to think independently, think creatively, use information that they learn from literature and other kinds of texts to learn how to think, and to use that information productively to make the world a better place. And if Common Core and the strands of Common Core, which I was actually saying to someone today, I don't care if it's called Common Core or Shmam and More. The fact is that the principles that it stands for, teaching students to think critically and use that information productively, is what's going to make this world a better place. And so I'm glad that we're all here today to look a little bit deeper as to how publishers can get into Common Core more deeply and help produce the students of tomorrow, the kind of students that I think we would all want our own children to be and to become as adults. And we're excited about this opportunity. Really quickly, the reason why we divided it up as we did, first starting with the youngest elementary school students, and then the older grade, and then the older, and finally high school, is because we believe that what happens in classrooms is different across the grade levels. And if we look at Common Core from the perspective of the grade range and age group, we're going to be much more effective at developing content for it and promoting the kind of learning that needs to happen in schools for schools to be successful. It's an absolute honor for me to introduce two people who have worked with APAS Educational Group, but have also worked in the field extensively. Our presenter today is Karri Weathers. And Karri has both studied education and taught school at all different grade levels. She was actually recently selected to work with the Tennessee Department of Education to support improvement in low-achieving schools. So on a daily basis, Karri is working with teachers, asking how to most effectively implement learning for Common Core. And she sees the resources that teachers have and the resources that they don't have. So I think her presentation will be quite enlightening for all of us. And then there's Shara Hillier. Shara was recently an early elementary school teacher in Hawaii and has really worked at all levels of education as well. And now she is the Content Area Director for English Language Arts at APAC. And in that role, she constantly thinks about how her experience in early elementary and other grades combine with the needs of publishers to create the highest quality content. So it's an absolute honor to introduce both Karri and Shara. And to just add one other thing, Karri, Shara, and I talked. And as former teachers and people who really encourage broad learning, when it comes time for questions at the end of both their presentations and a short discussion between them, we don't want it to feel like it's sages on the stage, because we know that many people in the audience also have wonderful things to say. So also think about, in terms of your participation, what insightful ideas you have to share. And you can add those in the chat box. And Karri and or Shara will happily comment on them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Karri Weathers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if it was working correctly. As Mr. Pass said, I am Karri Weathers, and I am very excited today to carry out this webinar with you. And I know we are looking at ending within an hour, so we're just going to jump right in and look at some questions that are posed before us. The first question that we are looking at is exactly what type of content do teachers want in the era of Common Core. And as Mr. Pass said, I have been very fortunate to work in multiple schools, multiple districts, and multiple classrooms. And I am finding a common trend across K-2 classrooms when it comes to content and what the teachers really need. Previously, before we started heading toward Common Core, kindergarten and second grade classrooms, through second grade classrooms, we pretty much already had the foundation that these grade levels needed hands-on interactive materials. And now we're seeing that more than ever when we're going in depth. The issue when it comes to publishers with that is that a lot of companies are throwing a lot of materials out there. There are lots of high quality content available for the teachers, and that's kind of a double-edged sword in a lot of classrooms. Teachers are being provided with lots of content and lots of materials. Quality and content is not really the issue in K-2. The issue is how it's organized, ready to use, and simplified. I'm going into classrooms, and a lot of the classrooms that I've been in just recently adopted new reading series, and teachers are extremely frustrated because there's so much stuff in there for them to use. So I think looking in terms of K-2, what teachers want materials that are easy to use, that are organized and simplified. They don't need or they don't have time to look through a lot of stuff, to hunt through packets, to open up boxes, to pull out things, and to tear pages apart so it's accessible to students. So I think it's really important in this era for publishers to take into consideration that we're looking at 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. I know when I was teaching kindergarten, one certain text that we had, math text, required, it was a book and a workbook, and it required, it had 200 pages. And it would require the teachers tearing out all of these pages out of this notebook because it's unrealistic to ask a kindergarten child to turn to page 142 when they don't know what number 142 is. So I think on terms of what teachers want, they had rather have fewer high-quality materials that they can use on a daily basis than a lot of materials that just sit on a shelf because they're too hard to access and too hard to look through and too hard to use. They're too time-consuming to put together. So that's a basic trend that I'm hearing now as far as materials go. Teachers want them organized, ready to use, simplified, with the thought of a 5-year-old being able to use them. When we're looking at higher order thinking prompts, questions, and directions for teachers, we're seeing Common Core push through, and we're holding students, we're holding teachers, we're holding education at a higher level than ever before. Kindergarten, if you can remember back when you were in kindergarten, was basically a social skill developing time. And we've taken it from that to learning letters and sounds to now students are reading in kindergarten. And in most cases, teachers are really good at creating low-level lessons for average students that are on 1 and 2 DOK levels. Teachers are good at those lessons. What they're not good at is ways to take a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old to higher DOKs. And that is difficult for me a lot of times to think of how can I take a 6-year-old to a higher depth of knowledge. And so teachers need a lot of reinforcement through their resources in that area. They need STEMs that promote higher order thinking. They need ideas on adding rigor into their lessons. Most texts that I have seen across schools and districts in K-2 primary classrooms offer a lot in terms of RTI. They offer a lot in terms of reteaching. But they're pretty weak on how to add rigor, how to get students in the classroom, how to bring low-level students up. We see a lot of reteaching in these texts, but we're not seeing a lot of how to add rigor to Tier 1, how to add rigor to just the everyday classroom. we're seeing more things of what to do with students that don't succeed in the regular classroom. We're seeing that most state standards are much lower level of thinking than Common Core with the depth that it's going into. And we're hearing things like accountable talk, and we're hearing things like performance tasks and high-level vocabulary and expression through writing, expression through conversation. And those pieces just have not been in our typical primary classrooms until Common Core came through. So that's something that teachers are really going to be looking for. Teachers that I know are hungry for rigor activities, hungry for incorporating writing and accountable talk, and how do I talk to kindergarten students using high-level vocabulary. It seems that in most cases these things have sort of been watered down in the past with most of the state standards. So that's another key concept for publishers in that what do teachers want? They need ideas for higher order thinking prompts, questioning, and directions, very explicit STEMs. Here are things you can ask the students to promote higher order thinking. Also, something new with Common Core is lessons that expand across the curriculum and grade level. In most cases, texts were very independent from grade level to grade level. I knew what I was required to teach and what my students were required to know in my specific grade level. But in most cases, teachers have to go out and look at standards above and below to find out more than that. And Common Core wants its initiative is to be a smooth flow from grade level to grade level and subject to subject. And teachers need resources to help them see where are the students coming from in the previous year. If we're looking at first grade, what should they have accomplished? What are they coming to me knowing from kindergarten? And what is my goal? What is my direction? Where am I pushing them toward for second grade? What do they need from me to be successful in second grade? And I think it's important for resources and publishers to include that so that we have the big picture, like Common Core is wanting us to see through their standards. So looking at how can you help teachers see the importance through subject and the importance through grade level. And while we're sitting here, and this may be going in a different direction, I'm seeing a question pop up that says, is the content the issue or the teacher training? And I will address that very quickly while we're looking at this. We are seeing, and I just came back from a retreat where a group of people that are doing the same thing that I'm doing discussed and collaborated. And I understand having all of the good resources is not a fix. There are a lot of teachers who need development. They need training. Honestly, there are a lot of teachers who need a new profession. But we're finding that in a lot of cases, it's not bad teaching. Teachers are working very hard. They're putting in lots of hours. They are very dedicated. They want to do better. They simply are teaching the wrong thing. It's a lot of really good teaching with a wrong focus. That is not every case, but that is the majority of cases that we're seeing in these low-performing schools. It's not teachers showing movies all day long. It's not teachers who don't care. It's teachers who are working very hard, but they're not working very smart. So just to address that before we move on from what teachers want and what teachers need in the era of Common Core. They need focus. They need direction.
Karri,
yes.
I'm sorry, this is Mark Schneiderman. So there was another timely question that I wonder if we could get to before you move to the next slide.
Yes, I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'll help to field those. So the question was, I think it was regarding your first point about the need for organized, ready-to-use, and simplified materials. And the question is, how does that play out with electronic materials? What are some?
Yes, actually that's coming up with the next question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. When we get to the next part, when we're looking at the structure of a good lesson, as I said, we're seeing a lot of issues with teachers not knowing how to get the rigor in the classroom. And RTI programs have just exploded. We see content for RTI, websites for RTI. RTI has just become a very popular thing in our world today. And what we're finding is that RTI is coming about because there are so many gaps in Tier 1, which is your everyday core instruction. So one thing that Common Core pushes for is a good foundation in kindergarten through 2nd grade. And if we have that good foundation and we have the in-depth learning of words and we have the in-depth learning of vocabulary, then these students will be able to focus and be able to accomplish success in the future. So when we're looking at what the teachers need in era of their lesson, they need an in-depth understanding of the foundational skills, which in reading would be the letters, the phonemes, the phonics, and morphemes. But when we're looking at math, we've got numbers and number sense and operations. So students need a good, solid foundation with no gaps. And that is exactly why RTI has blossomed, is because we're sending students through with a lot of gaps that we need to be hitting in core lessons in Tier 1 through K-2 primary grade levels. Also, the text should be designed for a purpose. When we're looking at exactly what gap are we hitting here, are we focusing on fluency, are we focusing on comprehension, a clear understanding of exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish through the text or through the performance task. And time for reflection. That has been a huge thing that has came about with Common Core standards, is allowing students the time to reflect on their learning and to write about their learning and to discuss and to take ownership in their learning. We're going much more towards student-focused rather than teacher-focused. When we move to the next question, and as I said, we're going to hit a little bit on some answers that will cover the organizational part. Also, what kinds of content are students willing to pay for in the era of Common Core? Teachers, administrators, directors, the state departments of education are being held more accountable for student learning now and for education than ever before. So in most cases, it's common that people realize high quality materials are extremely important. But as most of you know, budgets are set, funding is an issue, regardless of what our heart tells us and regardless of what we know is right. If you don't, have the funding there, it's not purchased. So when we're looking at what schools will pay for, they're looking for high quality materials that are sustainable over a number of years. So when we're looking at programs that require teachers or require schools or districts to purchase consumables every year, and I go into a lot of schools and teachers are afraid to write in the workbooks, afraid to let the teachers or the students write in the workbooks because they're saying, what if we don't purchase these next year? What if there's not money for these next year? So that has been an issue. And getting back to the question about technology, I feel that technology can answer that. It can help with the organization, but it also can help with the cost. Students can work with interactive apps. Students can work with Promethean board programs, with reading class sets that are on Kindles rather than consumable workbooks. So when we're looking at that, that also allows for the organizational part where you can go in and select and have everything established in folders or on a disk or on a website for you, and it's not just stacked all over the room. But it also answers the question of, or helps solve the problem of not having to purchase a workbook or consumable every year. So when we're looking at what schools will pay for, we're looking at things that is not going to be costly every year. things that are high quality, that can be easily accessed, which would take care with technology. And like I said, things that we're seeing that are not going to pop up with hidden costs. And we're seeing with a lot of textbook publishers that you get the initial product, but then anything extra costs more money on a yearly basis. And most of the time budgets are set, and you may get the money next year and you may not. So that is an issue for schools when it comes to having to have replacements the next year. Question while we're looking at that, technology products should not be subscription-based, renewable every year. And I think it all depends on that. There are programs that are subscription-based, and a lot of schools are using those. But when we're talking about, I'm thinking of more hard copy things when it comes to printing things off, things that things that maybe are not subscription-based, but you receive the disc or you receive something, access to the publisher's site where you put the things up on the Promethean board. I don't see any reason why those would have to be renewable every year. When we're getting with some programs that the students get on and sign up and it keeps track of records for you and you can print off reports and things like that, yes, those types of things. But if it's just a material that was purchased or created one time and it's never going to change and it's never going to update, then I don't see any reason why there should be a renewal every year when it's something that's on a disc or maybe even a textbook page that comes up on the Promethean board that is interactive. I don't see any reason why those things should be subscription-based. When we're looking at how does technology change learning and content in the era of Common Core, a lot of testing, I know Park and the Smarter Balance also are online testing, and the students are dragging and moving things and manipulating things through technology. And due to that, we do need to practice in the classroom. It's not fair to sit a child in front of a computer to take a test when they don't know how to click and drag, when technology is the issue rather than the content or the knowledge of the student. So how is it changing learning and content in the era of Common Core? We're going to have to use it more in the classrooms. Plus, coming along with that, when we're talking about content or publisher content being distributed through technology, we are having several schools and several districts that are choosing to go open source. And when you go open source, that means that you don't buy textbooks. Rather than buying books or hard copy materials, they're buying iPads and they're buying laptops and things of that sort for students. And because of that, they are going through downloading apps and purchasing ebooks and software programs for their students. And the whole concept behind that is to prepare them for the online testing and prepare them for everything that is headed online in the very near future, beginning next year for us. So there is that need because Common Core is coming in an electronic version through testing that there is kind of the panic of we have to get our students technology ready and we have to get our teachers technology ready. So there is a major focus toward getting more on technology.
Karri?
Yes.
Mark again, just a quick follow-up on that. So to what degree do you see the interest in adoption of technology and digital as specific to getting ready for online tests? And to what degree is it belief among educators that the digital delivery and the unique modalities and things addressed through digital and the adaptive nature, et cetera, are where they want to go anyway, regardless of whether the tests are online or not?
I think it depends on the school, the teacher. Of course, the era that the person grew up in, the age range of the teacher. I have heard several teachers saying, I like paper tests. I like to see it on paper. I like paper books. And you have some districts, some educational departments that are more in rural areas, and they just haven't advanced into that era of seeing a need for technology other than to prepare the students for what's coming up testing-wise. Then you have the new age of teachers and the more modern districts who they're going to be using the technology regardless. So I think to answer your question, it's a divide because there are districts out there and there are teachers and schools out there that were it not for Common Core coming in and PART coming in with online testing and online performance tasks and online examples, they wouldn't be using technology in their room at all to that extent for testing purposes or for instruction purposes.
Thank you.
When we are looking, did it go to the wrong slide? Yep, there we go, sorry. When we are looking, as far as the technology goes, a suggestion that I would see where publishers could make use of this is to have apps created and be creating interactive apps that can be downloaded on the iPads and the laptops. Offer ebooks, in conjunction with any passages or text that can be printed or big books. Offer books that can work on Kindles or books that can work on the iPad for the students, and software programs. I know some of the schools that I'm working in, they'll have options for some of these programs. One math program in particular, you can get it in the paper version or you can get it in the electronic version. And a lot of the schools are leaning toward purchases in the electronic version. So things can be downloaded and things can be interactive through apps. And that once again kind of does take the organizational part plus the consumable part of the repurchase. If you have it downloaded as an app where students can manipulate things, it can be used the next year. Plus it is organized and easy to find when they have it on an iPad or a laptop. I honestly see in the future that probably paper textbooks and consumables are going to be far and few between in a lot of our schools. I'm open for discussion or questions.
At this point, this is Andy. Why don't we invite Sheila to speak, and then we'll have the questions and follow-up afterwards. Sheila.
Thanks, Andy. I have some reactions to what was presented and a number of the questions that were asked as well. From my perspective, Common Core, particularly at the K-2 level, presents unique challenges for a number of the reasons that Karri identified, including that there is an emphasis on critical thinking, deep, thoughtful engagement, cross-curricular materials, particularly nonfiction texts. And these present challenges because we're simultaneously working with K-2 at those incredibly important foundational language skills. So it's always been a bit of a conundrum. How do you simultaneously teach the foundational skills that they need in order to become independent readers moving forward in higher levels of their education, and at the same time make sure that those comprehension skills are are where they need to be. And increasing Common Core presents increased rigor, particularly with respect to that. So to me, that's a really interesting challenge, and I think looking at the opportunity for technology here is critical, not just in testing. I do think that testing is an important part of the adoption of Common Core, but looking at using technology because it offers ways that students can engage critically with texts without having to be able to read them at any kind of independent level yet. And that's what I find fascinating as an opportunity. For example, thinking about a digital platform, a program in which students can choose specific story elements, right? Characters who have specifically identified traits, and then central story elements like a conflict and a resolution for the plot and setting, and all of those things that we teach. And the students then can choose them from a variety of templates offered to them through this program, and then at the end of it, it's created a book that they get to see, or it's created a digital animation movie of the story that they created. And so they're able to see how that story plays out and how their story elements created that. And then they can save that and create another one by changing only one or two specific elements, and thereby create a really rich discussion about comparing and contrasting how different parts of the story work, for example, or comparing with their classmates. So, I mean, that's just one that sort of pops into my head, but any number of different ways to think about really dynamic engagement with a text, both fiction and nonfiction, and using the specific media and platforms available to do that, to me, is a fascinating opportunity here. That's one of the main reactions that I had. I think that students come into the classroom already very creative, asking a lot of questions, wanting to think, wanting to solve puzzles. And we end up spending so much time focusing on practice, on repetition, so that they can hone these really important foundational skills and miss sometimes the opportunity for creation. And that is critical to me in this era of Common Core. So I think those are my sort of immediate reactions. There's a question, will schools teachers be creating their own course materials, such as Untitled Chapter?
There was actually a question before that. How can organization address the problem in critically low schools? And what we are finding in these schools is actually following straight through the textbook is becoming an issue in a lot of schools. And we're having, because of some textbook and publisher issues, we're having a lot of our discussion saying you can't rely on the textbook. You can't rely on what's given by the publisher, because there are a lot of gaps between the way that things need to be taught and what's being published out there. So one way that the organization can address is, because we also do have a lot of teachers that are having to hunt and pick through textbook materials and through publisher materials to find out what they need to use. Things are just sitting around. So with the organization in low-performing schools, if it is high-quality content that teachers can use and can use easily, they are more likely to use it than to let it sit on a shelf. And if it is high-quality content, then using it is what they need to be doing.
I completely agree from my personal experience that that's the case. I think in the creation of new materials that are aligned to Common Core, part of the issue is that publishers need to be starting with Common Core and looking at each of those standards and breaking them down into what individual objectives look like and how they're taught in individual lessons, and putting materials together in a way that is consistent with the instructional approach that a teacher who's well-versed in Common Core would take in the classroom in order to break those apart and teach them. So for me, that concept of publishers starting there, having experts look really at the standards and breaking them down carefully prior to developing any materials is a huge piece of it. And that way, when we're looking at the materials that we're getting, they're already organized in the same way that we would actually go about using them in the classroom for instructional purposes.
As far as the teachers creating their own materials, we're
Karri,
finding...
Karri,
Yes.
because I want to be on mute, because there's noise around me, let me just jump in for 1 second.
Okay.
So that you ladies and Mark know what I'm thinking. I feel like the conversation that's going, and everybody else actually, I feel like the conversation that's going back and forth right now between Karri and Shira is really good, and there's no need. I was originally going to jump in with a couple of questions. I'm not going to because I feel like this is effective, but please feel free right now to, if you haven't already done so, ask the questions that you're thinking. And if you have insights and ideas that you'd like to share with the group, please do so. Having said that, I'll turn on my mute again.
Okay, thank you. And a question that came up was, schools or teachers be creating their own course materials, such as pulling a chapter or two from a book, pulling magazine articles, combining it with their own homegrown content to create their own ebooks. And that also, for me, brings up an idea for publishers that I'm not sure, I haven't seen out there. It may be out there. Teachers are creating a lot on their own anyway, especially K-2 teachers, because a lot of text, K-2 is very small group oriented focused, and a lot of the text that we are seeing, especially with reading, the small group activities or the center work just consist of stand-up charts and flip books. And so teachers, I mean, you can make a lot of money selling teacher-made things right now. Teachers are going out to one website in particular where teachers are selling their teacher-made materials, and they're spending a lot of money there because K-2 teachers like cute, interactive things for their classroom. And while cute is not where the focus should be, it does play a part, just to be quite honest, with K-2 teachers. And so teachers like interactive. They like the cutting and the building and the manipulating. And that a lot of times, like Shira was talking about, creating the story, the creative part of it, that a lot of times the center work lacks through the flip books that I've seen a lot of. It sets this flip book up. It has directions for the students to do independently. They go around to the different flip books and they complete. And just a lot of teachers are not satisfied with that. So yes, a lot of teachers are creating their own units and their own materials, but they would not be creating those if they were getting them through publishers. And so perhaps even, I'm thinking as far as creating things, if publishers could have just offered templates and interactive creation programs for teachers, that might be a start in that direction.
I would love to jump in and answer the question posed by Leslie Schutz. Do teachers want instruction that follows DCSS structure, or is it enough that all standards are covered? My immediate response to that is that it is not enough for standards to simply be covered. If teachers want to map to Common Core, they can start with their own existing materials, which from my perspective a number of schools are doing, and then look at how their existing curriculum materials map, and then identifying gaps and looking to purchase materials that support where the gaps are. I think that's already taking place. In my opinion, if we're starting with new materials, it's not enough to simply say this goes with that standard, this goes with that standard. I think the whole point of Common Core is that it does provide a tremendous amount of clear, explicit language that indicates the depths at which we are looking to work with texts, both fiction and nonfiction, with students, and the skills that we're asking them, that we're teaching them and trying to get them to develop. So as a result, materials need to be starting, kind of as I mentioned before, with the language that's in the CCSS, and looking at what that really means, starting with language that's beyond words like identify, but to the point of determining meaning and analyzing. Those are high-level skills, and we're starting already at K-2 to look at that. So thinking about that, and then how you build to the level of analysis. You can't just jump in with a kindergartner and be looking at analysis. You have to build to that. So how do we build to that, starting with looking at the language in the standard and understanding how it's developed over the course of a year? I think that that's a really important part of building new materials, in my opinion.
Yes, and a question that is up is, does it make sense to create materials using a menu of options that's correlated to Common Core standards viewed by the objectives, the teaching techniques, the themes, and the cross-curricular? And yes, I do think that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times, if you did that, it would cover teachers like to sometimes do things in a different order. And sometimes textbooks follow the order that the curriculum is laid out to follow. And with some textbooks you can skip around and you can jump around. But with others, you're bound to the order that the publisher put in. And so I think a menu of options would be a good idea, where the teacher could choose standard to focus on and go through the different menu options that are listed there. Something else when Cheryl was talking that a lot of teachers have trouble with is if the publishers in the textbooks, especially when we're talking about those stems for higher order thinking for the teachers in K-2, a lot of things are very scripted, and they talk about what to say and what to do, and and how to provide students at getting the correct answer. But a lot of them lack on misconceptions and errors that the students may come up with and how to direct those to productive learning. And so I think it's also a good idea when publishers are creating the scripts for these teachers and creating the stems for the higher order thinking to provide the teacher with the what ifs. A student may see it this way because this is a clarification that can be made. Use those as teaching moments. And a lot of teachers need help in that area of, what do I do when a student comes up with something totally different from what is expected? How do I take that? What is a common misconception that students are going to have about this, or common errors that I make, and how can I turn those into teaching moments? And another question, do you mean providing a continuum? There are a lot of continuums. There's some continuums for Common Core standards and some suggestions on how those should be laid out and played out concept mapping-wise. But I really like the idea. I think teachers would really like the idea of the menu options and it not being stuck to a particular continuum that you have to follow unless it is one foundational skill-wise that is a progression, which the foundation of phonological awareness follows a continuum of progression for mastery. But just as far as within each standard having a menu option and not to a specific continuum, I think sounds like a good idea.
Karri, you're cutting out just a little bit. If you could make sure you're close to the phone.
Yes.
Thanks. And while we're waiting for our next question, I'll jump in with one quickly here, which is where are, especially K-2 level, since that's what we're talking about, where are educators looking to find resources? What criteria are they using to determine and help kind of evaluate resources or what sources of criteria are they looking to? And can you talk to some of that findability and evaluation that's going on among educators?
Sadly, right now, a lot of teachers, this is so new to a lot of teachers, they are hungry and looking, of course, to the web and to books and to PD. They're looking everywhere, and that's not the sad part. The sad part is I don't think a lot of them have a so-called rubric in mind that they're using. Because, like I said, it is kind of a new concept to a lot of people. I know some departments of education, when it comes to universal screening and in textbook, requirements and things, they have rubrics that they go by. But when we get to just individual teachers, most teachers don't have a good direction right now in knowing.
Well,
Common Core is a new thing on what is.
Right.
What is, quality and what is not.
What about at the school or district level?
Well, like I said, I know our Department of Education, has certain things that they look for rubric-wise. They kind of put out rubrics for districts saying, textbooks should meet these qualifications, universal screeners should meet these qualifications. But, that's, like I said, at most of the time being sent out at the state or the district level, not teacher level.
Okay. We have time for perhaps one more question. Is there any others? Otherwise, I have one more to end us on.
I have one as well, Mark.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Okay, so here's a question for you. I'm thinking about the challenges that Common Core is currently facing across the country, with much talk about localization and the fact that because they take away, people say that Common Core takes away localization, their states or their people within the states are against Common Core. And then I'm also thinking about Mark's question and Karri's comment about the rubrics that individual states can put in place. And these individual states can put their own rubrics in place. Do you think that there is, and I know I'm taking it a little away from the classroom, but do you think that there is an opportunity for schools to, and states and policymakers within states to argue that localization can occur even if Common Core is accepted on a far wider basis than a single state?
This is Shira. I think it's absolutely, I think that Common Core is not the antithesis of localization. I think Common Core provides the framework for creating a really productive national conversation and collaboration among educators in which we're all using the same language to describe as a foundation. From there, there's a tremendous amount of individual freedom and creativity both among specific teachers as well as schools and states in terms of implementation. So in my opinion, this is a really great opportunity to be sort of speaking the same language when it comes to, particularly in struggling schools, the discussion of student achievement and why we're having low-performing schools, what's going wrong, and to be able to discuss that using language that we all can understand what it means.
We are, thank you, Shira. We're just about at the top of the hour. I want to give our speakers one last chance if there's any final point you wanted to make. And if not, that's fine as well. Okay. All right. Well, just as I want to take a moment to thank Karri and Shira for joining us today. Thank Andy Pass and the Pass Education Group for joining with SIA on this series, or for inviting us to join with them on this series. I just put up the list of the next 3 webinars in this series as a reminder, so I encourage everyone to register for the upcoming events. We'll look at grades 3 to 5 on November 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So with that, I want to wish everybody a great day, and thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Karri and Shira.
Thank you. Please stand by.